Countless fictional films have been made about giants, but reality offers far more tangible evidence than cinema. If we cast aside our habitual skepticism and look closely at the material heritage of the past, it becomes obvious. History has left us a mass of artifacts that are impossible to ignore. Even our language preserves echoes of that era. We still use terms like Your Highness or the nearly forgotten Your Highborn, rarely stopping to think that these words originally indicated physical magnitude and actual height, not just the social status of a ruler. Museums and private collections around the world are overflowing with objects that a modern human physically could not use. There are books of incredible dimensions, the weight of which makes them impossible to read while holding them, and musical instruments whose anatomy is calculated for giants. Organs, double basses, and so-called octobasses, huge drums, trumpets, and saxophones require a lung capacity and finger length that we simply do not possess. This also applies to everyday items. The famous Tsar bath near St. Petersburg, papal rings through which a coin can freely pass, or crowns that would slip down to the shoulders of an ordinary person. Weapons attract particular attention. Exhibitions feature two-handed swords that are impossible to fence with effectively at a standard human height, and rifles of colossal size. Official history often classifies them as punt guns, stationary shotguns for commercial waterfowl hunting from boats. However, upon closer inspection, rifling is found in many such barrels, and the stocks show signs of being filed down and individually fitted. This indicates that these items served as standard handheld weapons braced against the shoulder. Only that shoulder belonged to a creature of completely different proportions. The architecture of historical centers also hints unambiguously at the size of its original owners. We see doors of immense height, handles positioned significantly higher than the head of a modern passerby, giant mirrors, and corresponding furniture. In ancient structures, like the complex in Baalbek, huge steps have been preserved, which were later roughly hewn down or supplemented with small intermediate stairs to adapt them to the stride of a person of our height. The picture is completed by cyclopean sarcophagi found in Germany and footprints of giant feet frozen in stone all over the world. Art has also documented this coexistence. On ancient bas-reliefs, sculptures, and canvases by famous masters such as Jan van Eyck, characters are often depicted towering over the other participants in the scene. Engravings have survived that describe daily life in detail, such as smoking accessories, the real prototypes of which, huge pipes, are kept in museum storage today and look absolutely unusable for us. However, when systematizing these finds, researchers encountered an interesting anomaly. The sizes of artifacts and architectural elements are not uniform. Some buildings and objects are clearly created for people about 3.5 meters tall, while other, even more grandiose structures imply the existence of beings up to 15 meters in height. This disparity in scale suggests that in the past, completely different species of intelligent beings, whose physical parameters differed radically from each other, existed on Earth simultaneously or sequentially. A careful analysis of architectural heritage and archaeological finds allows us to build a clearer classification of this vanished civilization, dividing its representatives into two main groups. Researchers who have closely studied the ancient architecture of European cities have noticed an interesting pattern. The centers of many ancient polis are formed by buildings whose proportions, ceiling heights, window openings, and door arches, are ideally suited for beings about 3.5 meters tall. These Atlanteans, judging by the preservation of the infrastructure, coexisted with humanity in the historically foreseeable past. However, there is another, more ancient layer testifying to the presence of true titans. Grandiose structures such as the famous Roman baths possess doorways calculated for beings up to 15 meters tall. Researchers tentatively call these giants the 15ers. Their disappearance is linked to a global cataclysm known as the War of the Flood. Europe is literally strewn with memorials of that era. Numerous bas-reliefs and fountains detail scenes of beings perishing under the debris of collapsing buildings in the waters of an unstoppable element. Confirmations of this catastrophe can also be found in art. The engravings of the famous ruinist Piranesi, if viewed not as fantasy but as documentary records, demonstrate a world that survived a massive flood, where colossal skulls are found among the silt and ruins. Similar subjects are present in ancient frescoes, often accompanied by Latin inscriptions warning of the suddenness of the end, for no one knows the day nor the hour. Archival data on discovered skeletons only confirm this gradation. Historical chronicles have preserved information about finds of remains of incredible proportions. From a skeleton nearly 6 meters tall discovered in Lucerne, Switzerland at the end of the 16th century, to 7-meter remains in France, and even mentions of bones of beings reaching almost 11 meters in height. Here, a legitimate question arises, which often becomes the main argument of skeptics. How could such creatures function biologically? Modern biomechanics asserts that, with Earth's gravity, bones of that size would not support the body weight, and the heart would not be able to pump blood to such a height. However, this argument is valid only if we consider conditions on our planet to be unchanging constants. The answer to the riddle of the giants' existence lies not in their anatomy, but in the fundamental laws of planetary scale physics, the secret of which, according to legends, was known to Macedonian priests. The question of why these beings reached such impressive sizes remained unanswered for a long time, until information kept by Macedonian priests was voiced. The solution lies not in biological mutations, but in environmental conditions. The genetics and skeletal structure of the giants formed and functioned in conditions of significantly lower gravity than what we are used to today. According to ancient legends, the Titans were a special race of intelligent beings, possessing technologies and knowledge far ahead of even the boldest concepts of modern science. These stellar engineers did not just look for habitable worlds, they knew how to create them. The priests describe a process that may seem like science fiction today. Giants used asteroids as blanks for future planets. The technology involved finding a suitable celestial body, making a deep puncture in its rock, and pumping a special substance inside. Under the influence of the reaction that followed, the asteroid would begin to expand rapidly, increasing in volume just like a plastic preform inflates during bottle production. As a result of this process, the density of matter dropped and the object's size increased manifold, which ensured the creation of comfortable low gravity on the surface. After the new mini-planet reached the necessary dimensions, an atmosphere was formed on it, and flora and fauna were introduced. On such artificially created arcs, the giants traveled across the universe, possibly integrating their worlds into existing solar systems to obtain stellar energy. This theory forces us to look at the history of our own home in a completely new way. There is a hypothesis that Earth is also an artificially expanded object. This explains the geological phenomenon of planetary expansion, which is confirmed by the fact that the outlines of all modern continents fit perfectly into a single hole on a globe of significantly smaller diameter. If we accept this bold concept, it turns out that we live on a construct once created or modified by this ancient civilization. But any technology, even the most incredible, requires energy and resources. To launch the process of planetary expansion, a very specific catalyst is needed, a substance with unique physical properties. And the most amazing thing in this story is that this component is not a mythical ether. It is a real, tangible mineral, the only major deposit of which is located right here on our planet. And access to it today is strictly controlled, guarded by US military forces. The substance which, according to this bold theory, serves as a catalyst for planetary engineering is known to modern geology as laurendite. This is not a mythical element from fairy tales, but a very real, albeit extremely rare mineral, representing a thallium arsenic sulfosalt. It possesses a characteristic carmine red color, a diamond luster, and is found in low-temperature hydrothermal veins. The most surprising fact is that the only deposit on the planet with large reserves of this crystal is located in the Al-Char mountain massif, within the territory of modern Macedonia. It is this geographical coincidence that links the legends of Macedonian priests and modern scientific facts. In the scientific world, laurendite is worth its weight in gold. Not because of jewelry qualities, but thanks to its unique physical properties. It is used to detect solar neutrinos and participate in complex nuclear reactions. However, according to information preserved by the keepers of ancient knowledge, the mineral's potential goes far beyond registering subatomic particles. It is claimed that with the help of laurendite, one can generate antimatter and create local anti-gravity fields. In ancient times, Macedonian priests made special amulets in the shape of pyramids from this stone, which Alexander the Great and his generals wore, believing in their magical power. Interest in this deposit is shown not only by scientists and esotericists. Since the 1990s, the territory around the laurendite deposits has been under close surveillance and protection by military structures, including American contingents. Such secrecy and security measures suggest that the true purpose of the mineral may be far more serious than simple geological research. It is impossible not to draw a parallel here with modern pop culture, specifically with James Cameron's cult film, Avatar. The plot of the blockbuster is built around the extraction of a rare mineral on the planet Pandora, unobtainium, which possesses anti-gravity properties and costs a fortune. Many independent researchers believe that Cameron is a kind of insider who, through cinematic images, transmits information hidden from the masses. His films often feature giant trees, unusual connections between living beings, and technologies suspiciously reminiscent of the lost knowledge of antiquity. Laurendite, with its ability to affect gravity and the structure of matter, looks like the real prototype of that cinematic unobtainium. If we assume that the giants indeed used this mineral to create planets and manipulate gravity, it becomes clear how they could exist in comfortable conditions. They lived in a world where physical laws were tuned for them. A kind of technological paradise with low gravity and an ideal environment. But today we see a completely different picture. Where did this idyll vanish? Why is modern humanity forced to survive in conditions of an aggressive climate, high atmospheric pressure, and gravity that literally presses us to the ground? The answer lies in the catastrophic changes that befell our planet's atmosphere. The natural state of our planet, if we rely on the reconstruction of past conditions, differed radically from the harsh climatic picture we observe today. Before the catastrophic events of the 19th century, Earth was essentially a giant greenhouse. High in the atmosphere, there was a dense water vapor canopy that acted as an ideal thermoregulator. This dome created a uniform, mild climate over the entire surface of the globe, from the equator to the poles, excluding the existence of scorched deserts and zones of permafrost. Confirmation of this theory is provided by numerous antique statues and images found in regions where cold winters reign today. In them, people are invariably depicted in light tunics or completely naked. In the art of the past, it is impossible to find a statue of a man in a sheepskin coat, fur coat, or on a sleigh, which would be absurd for the modern climate of these latitudes. Moreover, on ancient maps of the northern regions, for example, the legendary Hyperborea, land free of ice is depicted where our ancestors lived. The fact that the North Pole today is a lifeless, icy desert is not the norm, but the consequence of a global accident. According to this version of history, The fragile balance was disturbed in the early 19th century as a result of a massive conflict involving powerful weapons, traces of which are interpreted as the consequences of a nuclear war of the past. Explosions lifted a colossal amount of dust and soot into the stratosphere. When these particles reached the vapor canopy, they became condensation centers. The water vapor shell, which had held in the atmosphere for millennia, lost stability and poured down onto the Earth in monstrous rains of biblical scale. It is this process that explains the phenomenon of the Great Flood as a physical event, not a religious metaphor. In the polar regions, due to air circulation peculiarities and a sharp drop in temperatures, this water fell not as rain, but as icy slush and snow, instantly freezing everything living. The current ice caps of Greenland and Antarctica are not the result of precipitation accumulation over millions of years, as academic scientists claim, but the frozen waters of that very flood. The melting of this ice today, which causes panic among environmentalists, is actually a natural process of the planet returning to its original pre-catastrophe state. However, the most dramatic consequence of the dome's collapse was not the temperature change, but a sharp drop in atmospheric pressure. The water that left the atmosphere for the ocean ceased to press on the air surface. The pressure dropped by almost half. For giant organisms whose physiology depended on a dense atmosphere, this was a death sentence. Moving became incredibly difficult, and they began to degenerate rapidly. But this change hit not only the giants. We, modern humans, also became hostages of this new, rarefied environment, and our bodies were forced to seek ways to survive in conditions for which they were not originally designed. The catastrophic drop in atmospheric pressure that followed the destruction of the vapor canopy became a turning point in the biological history of Earth. The physics of the process is relentless. When external pressure drops, the internal load on the organism increases manifold. For giants, whose physiology formed in conditions of a dense and saturated atmosphere, these changes proved fatal. Their skeletons and cardiovascular systems, perfectly balanced for the former world, suddenly ceased to cope with gravity in a rarefied environment. This explains the fact that in rare documentary footage and photographs of the 19th century, tall people are often captured with canes or crutches. This is not a tribute to fashion or a sign of old age, but evidence of a painful struggle with their own weight in a world that ceased to support them. The remaining representatives of this race did not just fade into the shadows, they slowly withered away, losing mobility and vitality. However, the consequences of this planetary decompression affected not only the Titans. We, humans of the modern type, are also biological hostages of the changed environment. Our body is forced to constantly compensate for the lack of external pressure, working literally in overdrive. A vivid marker of this struggle is our physiological dependence on table salt. Doctors often argue about the harm and benefits of sodium, but few consider this issue from the point of view of physics. Salt retains water, increasing the volume of blood and lymph, which allows us to artificially maintain the necessary intracellular pressure. In essence, our constant desire to salt our food is the body's unconscious attempt to even out the balance and approximate the conditions in which it was originally designed. This operation in emergency mode leads to premature wear of all life support systems. Studies show that the biological resource of our internal organs is calculated for a much longer period of operation. For example, the potential of the human liver is estimated by gerontologists at 500 to 600 years. This organ possesses a unique ability to regenerate, which in modern conditions is practically not realized to its full extent. We burn through this giant resource in some 70 or 80 years simply trying to maintain homeostasis in an aggressive environment with low pressure and hard radiation, from which the vapor shell no longer protects us. We have lost not only physical longevity and giant stature. Along with a change in environmental conditions, humanity likely lost access to hidden reserves of its own body and consciousness. Physical degradation could have been accompanied by the loss of unique technologies for interacting with matter that were previously available to our species. There are testimonies hinting that our ancestors possessed ways to overcome gravity without using complex mechanisms, relying only on knowledge of the laws of acoustics and resonance. One such amazing example has been preserved in the ethnographic archives of Macedonia, forcing us to guess, where is the line between forgotten science and magic? Among the many lost technologies of the past, which today are mistakenly taken for magic or folklore fiction, methods of controlling gravity using sound occupy a special place. Archives have preserved unique pre-war testimonies from Macedonia, recording practices that seem impossible to modern physics. We are not talking about fairy tales, but about a concrete, applied methodology that local residents use to solve everyday transport tasks, crossing water barriers. The essence of the technology lay in using the principles of acoustic resonance and collective bioenergetics. In order to get across a river or a wide stream in the absence of a bridge, people gathered in groups and formed a closed chain holding hands. This process resembled a traditional round dance, but its function was not entertainment but energy generation. The participants began to perform special rhythmic songs, strictly monitoring the tonality and frequency of the sound. The human body, consisting mainly of water, is an excellent conductor of vibrations, and in this case, the group acted as a single living resonator circuit. As the tonality of the singing changed, the vibration increased, and the group entered a state of so-called acoustic resonance with the environment. At the moment of reaching the peak frequency, the chain opened. The energy accumulated in this living circuit was released directionally, acting on the person closest to the water's edge. As a result, a momentary levitation occurred. The person literally soared into the air and was smoothly transferred to the opposite bank. According to information received from the keepers of these traditions, in this way it was possible to effortlessly cross rivers up to 20 meters wide. This phenomenon proves that our ancestors possessed a deep understanding of the wave nature of matter. They knew that sound is not just the vibration of air, but a powerful tool capable of changing the physical characteristics of space and overcoming the force of gravity. What laboratories today are trying to recreate with super-powerful emitters to levitate a drop of water was previously available to ordinary people thanks to the knowledge of the correct frequencies and collective interaction. However, the presence of such fundamental knowledge in a people, giving independence and strength, has always caused concern among those who strive for total control. Keepers of ancient wisdom, capable of controlling the forces of nature without the technical crutches of civilization, represented a threat to the established system. It was the fact that for centuries these unique skills and a high concentration of people possessing priestly knowledge were preserved in Macedonia that played a fatal role in the fate of this region. History shows that carriers of such memory are not just forgotten, they are purposefully displaced, freeing territories for those who do not remember their past. The tragedy of modern Macedonia serves as a grim example of how the strategy of a soft takeover of territories and the erasure of historical memory is implemented. This land, once saturated with priestly knowledge and guarding the secrets of ancient civilizations, became the object of a geopolitical operation whose goal is not just shifting borders, but the complete replacement of the ethnicity that holds the information. Social cataclysms, which from the outside looked like spontaneous conflicts, actually had a clear vector. During the Yugoslav crisis, military actions and NATO bombings were organized in such a way as to create a controlled corridor for migration. Through this corridor, hundreds of thousands of refugees from Albania were directed into historically Macedonian lands. This was not a chaotic flight, but resembled a planned resettlement. Having settled on new lands, the newcomers quickly legalized themselves, moved their numerous families, and, taking advantage of the support of local authorities, received citizenship. This launched the mechanism of a demographic bomb. High birth rates and clan cohesion allowed the new population in an incredibly short time, literally within a decade, to increase its numbers to 500,000 people, which radically changed the balance of power in the small state. Soon, quantity grew into political quality. Representatives of the new diaspora began to actively penetrate all power structures: parliament, courts, police, and mass media. What sociologists call the replacement of elites occurred. The indigenous population, the Macedonians, whose ancestors knew the secrets of acoustic resonance and kept the memory of the giants, found themselves pushed to the margins of social life. Today, they increasingly occupy low-skilled jobs, sweeping streets or working in the service sector, while the management of their country passes into foreign hands. This process of destroying the cultural code through population replacement happens quietly, without loud battles, but with irreversible efficiency. It is not just a people that is being destroyed, but a carrier of unique information about our planet's past. If previously knowledge about levitation, the mineral laurendite, and the technologies of the giants was passed down from generation to generation, now this chain is being broken. The new masters of the land have no connection with its deep past. For them, it is simply territory for living. We began our narrative with giants who disappeared under the influence of climatic catastrophes, and we end with what is happening right now outside our windows. Technologies are forgotten, giants have died out, and the peoples preserving the memory of this are methodically being replaced by others. This scenario, tested in the Balkans, is becoming increasingly visible today in the prosperous countries of Europe and America. Ancient history is being erased to make way for a new world order, where there is no place for the miracles of the past.